You couldn't say pregnant. Elvis Presley was filmed only from the waist up because his hips were too sexual for American audiences. But some shows pushed further. They dared to challenge the rules, to question the war, to show interracial relationships, to suggest that maybe not everything in America was perfect. This is the story of 1960s television that never made it to your screen. The episodes they didn't want you to see. The moments that were too shocking, too provocative, too dangerous for prime time. Let's start with the most controversial show of the decade. A variety show that looked innocent enough. Two clean-cut brothers. One played guitar, one played bass. They told jokes, they sang songs, and they got canceled for it. The Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour premiered on CBS in February 1967. Tom and Dick Smothers seemed safe, innocent. But the Smothers Brothers had other plans. They invited rock bands like The Who and Jefferson Airplane. They featured comedians who mocked the establishment. They gave airtime to Vietnam War protesters. And CBS had a problem. September 1967, the show's second season premiere. Tom and Dick invited folk singer Pete Seeger, a man who hadn't appeared on network television in 17 years. Why? Seeger had been blacklisted since the 1950s, accused of supporting communists, investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee, banned from commercial TV because his politics were too dangerous. He performed 4 songs, including one called "Waist Deep in the Big Muddy." The song told a story, a military training exercise in 1942, a captain forcing his men to cross a dangerous river. Each verse ending with, "We were waist deep in the big muddy, and the big fool said to push on." The metaphor was obvious. The big muddy was Vietnam. The big fool was President Lyndon Johnson, and the message was clear: get out before we all drown. Seeger performed all 4 songs for the studio audience. They loved it. But when the show aired that Sunday night, "Waist Deep in the Big Muddy" was gone, completely erased. Viewers saw Seeger sing "Whim Away" and "Guantanamera," then a sharp, obvious edit. Suddenly, Seeger's guitar had transformed into a banjo. The anti-war song had been censored. CBS executives had deleted it from the tape. Their reason? It insulted President Johnson, and CBS President William Paley was Johnson's personal friend. 5 months later, in February 1968, CBS relented. Seeger returned, and this time he sang "Waist Deep in the Big Muddy" on national television. 12 million American households watched Pete Seeger defy the blacklist, challenge the war, and call the president a fool. On prime-time television. 2 days later, Walter Cronkite called for American withdrawal from Vietnam. The tide was turning, and the Smothers Brothers had helped turn it. But that was just the beginning. The battles between CBS and the Smothers Brothers became legendary. When The Who performed "My Generation," they ended by smashing their instruments and accidentally set off an explosive charge so powerful it nearly blew them off stage. CBS was horrified. Harry Belafonte taped a performance standing in front of footage showing police beating protesters at the 1968 Democratic National Convention. CBS cut the entire segment. They filled the empty 5 minutes with Nixon campaign ads. Folk singer Joan Baez dedicated her performance to her husband, who'd just been jailed for resisting the draft. CBS edited out her statement. When the Smothers Brothers protested, CBS pulled the entire episode and aired a rerun instead. David Steinberg did a series of sketches playing a pastor delivering satirical sermons. CBS called them sacrilegious and banned them. The Smothers Brothers started waving censored scripts on camera. "We're being shut up by CBS," they declared. Despite the battles, or maybe because of them, the show was a massive hit. It ranked 12th in the nation. It won an Emmy. Young audiences loved it. It was appointment television for the counterculture generation. But in April 1969, CBS had enough. They canceled the show. claimed the brothers violated their contract by delivering an episode late. But everyone knew the truth. The show was too political, too anti-war, too controversial for a network trying to maintain relationships with the Johnson administration. The Smothers Brothers had proven something important. Entertainment television could challenge power, could oppose war, could give voice to opinions, and the establishment would punish you for it. Before we continue with canceled shows, let's talk about what was considered too controversial in the 1960s. Because by today's standards, it's absurd. When Lucille Ball was pregnant during I Love Lucy, nobody could say the word pregnant on television. Too scandalous, too explicit, too biological. Instead, Lucy Ricardo was expecting, with child, or having a baby. Anything but the actual medical term for being pregnant. This was 1952, but the band continued well into the 1960s. The word pregnant was considered obscene on network television, as if pretending pregnancy didn't exist would make it less real. Married couples on TV slept in separate beds, always, even if they had children. It wasn't until 1947 that a married couple shared a bed on screen, on a show called Mary Kay and Johnny, that most people have never heard of. But the practice of separate beds continued into the mid-1960s. Heaven forbid American audiences see married people sleep in the same bed. Barbara Eden, star of I Dream of Jeannie, wore a harem outfit, but her navel had to be covered at all times. NBC executives held a meeting, and yes, this is real, specifically to discuss Eden's belly button. The conclusion? Too risque. Cover it up. Eden recalls there were so many suits sitting around a table discussing someone's anatomy. The solution was a high waistband that covered the offensive belly button. The irony? In one beach episode, Eden wears a one-piece swimsuit while bikini-clad extras cavort around her, navels fully visible. Apparently, those navels were fine, just not Jeannie's. In 1957, Leave It to Beaver became the first show to feature a toilet, but only the tank. The actual bowl was too shocking. The episode involved Wally hiding his pet alligator in the toilet tank. Originally, they wanted to show the full toilet. CBS executives were so offended that the episode's air date was delayed until a compromise was reached. Tank yes, bowl number. It wasn't until 1971 that a toilet was allowed to flush on television. On All in the Family, Archie Bunker earned that honor. When Elvis Presley appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, his gyrating hips were deemed too sexually provocative for American audiences. The solution? Film him only from the waist up. The king of rock and roll. Shown only from the chest up, because hips moving to music might corrupt the youth of America. Anti-miscegenation laws were still on the books in some states until 1967. Showing interracial relationships on television was essentially forbidden. When Star Trek aired the famous Kirk Uhura kiss in 1968, widely considered the first interracial kiss on American network TV, one station in Alabama refused to air the episode. NBC filmed multiple takes, some with the kiss, some without, giving nervous executives an escape route. They chose to air the kiss. Most letters to NBC were positive, but the controversy was real. This was what America considered too controversial. Words, body parts, married couples sleeping together, a toilet doing what toilets do. The 1960s were fighting for civil rights, protesting war, and launching rockets to the moon. But television executives were terrified of belly buttons. In February 1969, a new sketch comedy show premiered. Turn On was created by the same team behind the hit show, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. It promised to be edgy, provocative, and hilarious. It lasted one episode. Technically, it didn't even last that long. Some affiliates pulled it mid-broadcast. The show was deliberately controversial. Sexual innuendo, drug references, rapid-fire editing, envelope-pushing humor that made Laugh-In look tame. Cleveland's affiliate didn't just refuse to air it. Their general manager sent a telegram to the network during the show, saying they were pulling the plug. Other stations followed. Turn On demonstrated that there were limits. You could push boundaries, but push too far, and you'd be gone before the credits rolled. Even the respected Twilight Zone wasn't immune to controversy. The episode The Encounter featured a Japanese-American man, played by a young George Takei, and a World War II veteran in an intense, racially charged confrontation. The episode dealt with racism, war trauma, and guilt. It was powerful, provocative, and uncomfortable. Too uncomfortable for 1964 America. After its initial airing, the episode was pulled from syndication for decades. Not because it was poorly made, but because it forced conversations about race and war that America wasn't ready to have. Back to the Smothers Brothers for a moment. When The Who performed, they insisted on their traditional finale, smashing their instruments. CBS reluctantly agreed, not knowing that Pete Townshend and Keith Moon had something special planned. A much larger explosive charge was loaded into Moon's drum set than the network expected. When it detonated, the blast pushed singer Roger Daltrey almost off stage. Burning sparks landed on Townshend's hair. Shrapnel peppered Moon's arms. The explosion was so loud that Townshend suffered permanent hearing damage. CBS was furious. This wasn't edgy comedy. This was dangerous. This was chaos. This was exactly what they feared about the counterculture. It was literally explosive. Perhaps the most powerful censored moment came in the 1968 to 1969 season premiere. Singer Harry Belafonte was scheduled to perform his song while standing in front of filmed footage from the 1968 Democratic National Convention, where police had violently beaten protesters in the streets of Chicago. The combination of Belafonte's music with images of police brutality was too much for CBS. They deleted the entire segment, 5 minutes of dead air, which they filled with Republican campaign ads for Richard Nixon. Think about that. A network censored criticism of police violence and replaced it with campaign ads for the law and order candidate. The message was clear. You could entertain, but you couldn't challenge power. You could sing, but not about what mattered. You could be on television, but only if you stayed in your lane. Folk singer Joan Baez appeared on the show to dedicate her performance to her husband, David Harris, who was entering prison for refusing military service. CBS allowed Baez to mention her husband was in prison, but they edited out why. Draft resistance was too controversial. Opposing the war was one thing. Actively refusing to serve was another. The Smothers Brothers had crossed a line CBS wouldn't allow, giving platform to actual resistance, not just criticism. Despite their cancellation, or perhaps because of it, the Smothers Brothers changed television forever. They proved entertainment could be political. That primetime TV wasn't just for escapism. That variety shows could challenge viewers, not just comfort them. They gave Pete Seeger his first network appearance in 17 years, effectively ending his blacklist. They gave voice to anti-war sentiment when the mainstream media still supported the war. They platformed the counterculture when the establishment wanted it silenced. After their cancellation, public support poured in. The New York Times ran an editorial defending them. Look magazine did a cover story. The firing backfired, making the Smothers Brothers martyrs for free speech. More importantly, they opened doors. All in the Family could tackle controversial topics because the Smothers Brothers had fought that battle. MASH could critique war. Maude could discuss abortion. The Jeffersons could address racism. The Smothers Brothers lost their show, but they won the war over what television could be. The censorship wasn't limited to the Smothers Brothers. In 1963, a young Bob Dylan was scheduled to perform on The Ed Sullivan Show. During dress rehearsal, a CBS executive heard Dylan's song choice and objected. The lyrics referenced political figures and suggested satirical views about American politics. Dylan was given an ultimatum: sing a different song or change the lyrics. Dylan walked out. He refused to compromise his art for television. This was the choice artists faced in the 1960s: self-censor or don't appear. Most chose to self-censor. Dylan chose his principles. The Doors were invited to perform on The Ed Sullivan Show in 1967. Their song, Light My Fire, contained the line, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher." CBS feared audiences would interpret this as a drug reference. They demanded Jim Morrison change the lyric to, "Girl, we couldn't get much better." Morrison agreed. Then, during the live performance, he sang the original lyric anyway. He looked directly at the camera and sang, "Higher." The Doors were banned from ever appearing on the show again. Morrison didn't care. He'd made his point. Artists wouldn't be controlled. This wasn't just about entertainment. This was about who controlled the narrative in America. Television in the 1960s was the most powerful medium in the country. More powerful than newspapers, more influential than radio. If you controlled television, you controlled the national conversation. The censorship battles were about whether that conversation would include dissent, whether it would question authority, whether it would challenge the war, the establishment, the status quo. The censors wanted television to be safe, comfortable, escapist. The artists wanted it to be honest, challenging, real. Looking back, the censorship seems absurd. We laugh at executives terrified of belly buttons. We roll our eyes at the word pregnant being banned. We can't believe married couples couldn't share beds. But the serious censorship, the silencing of anti-war voices, the blacklisting of artists for political views, the deletion of segments showing police brutality, that wasn't funny. That was control. The 1960s were America's most turbulent decade since the Civil War. Vietnam, assassinations, civil rights, riots, revolution, the counterculture versus the establishment, the young versus the old, the future versus the past. And television was the battlefield where these forces met. Shows like the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour weren't just entertainment. They were acts of resistance. Every censored segment was a reminder that someone was trying to control what Americans could see, hear, and think. The shows that were too controversial to air weren't controversial because they were poorly made or tasteless. They were controversial because they challenged power. They gave voice to dissent. They suggested that maybe, just maybe, America wasn't living up to its ideals. Today, we can watch almost anything. Cable TV has no content restrictions. Streaming services are uncensored. The internet is the Wild West. We've gone from banning the word pregnant to, well, you know what's available today. But we shouldn't forget what it took to get here. Artists who walked off shows rather than self-censor. Comedians who lost their careers for speaking truth. Musicians who were blacklisted for opposing war. Producers who fought networks for the right to create honest content. The Smothers Brothers, Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan, Jim Morrison, Joan Baez, Harry Belafonte. These artists didn't just make television. They fought for the right to make it honestly. They lost battles. They lost shows. They lost income. But they won something more important: the right to challenge authority on America's most powerful medium. The 1960s television that was too controversial to air taught us something vital. Art that makes no one uncomfortable is probably saying nothing important. Controversy isn't a bug, it's a feature. It means you're touching nerves that need touching. So the next time you watch a show that tackles difficult subjects, that challenges authority, that makes you uncomfortable, remember the Smothers Brothers. Remember Pete Seeger being censored for opposing war. Remember artists who fought so that television could be more than just entertainment. They made television a place where truth could be spoken, where power could be questioned, where dissent could be heard. And they paid the price for it. But they also paved the way. The shows that were too controversial to air in the 1960s, they're the reason television today can air anything at all.